Very good morning to one and all present here. Today we have Professor Sankarshan Basu, an eminent scholar and academic luminary in the field of finance and accounting. Professor Basu currently holds the distinguished position of Dean at the Amrit School of Management, Ahmedabad University, and also serves as a professor in the Department of Finance and Accounting at the prestigious Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. With a remarkable academic journey and extensive experience, Professor Basu has made significant contributions to the world of finance and quantitative research. Professor Basu's research interests are diverse, spanning across financial calculus, option pricing, bond and portfolio evaluation, applications of quantitative techniques to finance, insurance, reinsurance, risk management, biostatistics, and corporate finance. His academic pursuits have taken him to international platforms where he has presented his work at conferences held in various countries across the globe. His scholarly contributions are evident through the publication of numerous research papers in renowned international journals like Insurance Mathematics and Economics and the Journal of Statistical Planning and Inference. Professor Basu's impact extends beyond academia as he actively participates in consulting and training projects for various domains, including banks such as State Bank of India, HDFC, Vijaya, Federal, insurance companies like ING Vaishya Life Insurance, stock exchanges like the Bombay Stock Exchange, and various governmental agencies such as the Indian Revenue Service and the Indian Foreign Service. Professor Basu's involvement is not limited to the academic and corporate sector. He also serves on the boards of select companies, including the Clearing Corporation of India Limited, the Bangalore Stock Exchange Limited, and Billcare India. His educational background is equally impressive with a PhD in statistics from the London School of Economics and Political Science, and MSc in statistics from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and a BSc honors in statistics from Presidency College, Calcutta. In addition to his many achievements, Professor Basu currently holds the esteemed position of President of the Asia Pacific Risk and Insurance Association. With his extensive knowledge, remarkable research contributions, and academic leadership, Professor Sankarshan Basu continues to be a guiding force in the world of finance and accounting. On behalf of Christ University, we welcome you, sir, for today's session on quantitative finance and machine learning, bridging the gap. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you and good morning to all of you. It's indeed a real pleasure to be here to kind of talk to all of you all about quantitative finance and machine learning because I think in the last about 2 decades, the world of finance has significantly changed. And today, from finance when I was growing up, or I think when most of us were growing up 35 years back, was pretty much a realm of the accountants and the commerce professionals. Today, finance has moved way beyond that, and today, finance is kind of as much a domain of engineers and quants and science graduates as commerce graduates and industry. So I don't think there is any one area that is. The other thing that has kind of really happened is, I think, the amount of computational power the world has kind of seen, the explosion in the computation power and all of it, which is evident in the context of all the machine learning techniques, the artificial neural networks, and the artificial intelligence, and all that has kind of come about. All of it, as we know, in the last about 10, 15 odd years, has significantly helped address financial markets and financial products because one of the biggest problems or not, I wouldn't say problem, but one of the biggest challenges in the financial market is our ability to predict and our ability to predict for the future. Uh, and it's a bigger problem in finance or financial markets because unlike any other product, unlike any other market, for example, if I were to buy a pen or if I were to buy a phone or a laptop, and if it didn't work, right, there's an immediate reaction. It doesn't work, so I can take it back. I can take it back to the shop. I can get it replaced, repaired, whatever the process is. The problem of financial market products is that an investment today, a decision today, will only bear fruit and will only be, and one will only be able to judge it at a future point in time, maybe 10, 15 years down the line. And most importantly, you can't reverse the decision. 15 years later, I can't go back and say that, oh, no, my original decision was wrong and I need to kind of correct it and I need to do something. I should have done something else, which is what I can do with most of the other products. And therefore, the need to kind of be able to predict the future with higher level of accuracy is what drives all of this. At some level, what is machine learning? What does all of this do? It gives you it does not tell you what the correct answer is. Nobody will be able to tell you what the correct answer is because none of us know that. It's out there, but none of us know that. But what it does is it enhances the potential set of alternates that can come about. And therefore, we have a better understanding of what the future is. Do we have a perfect understanding? The answer is no. We'll never have it. But can we have a better understanding? And the answer and the product and the rationale is essentially that's what this is doing. You have various different machine learning techniques and then all of that help you kind of identify that to take it forward. If I take a very simple example, if I want to manually do an iteration, I might be able to do 100 cycles, 1,000 cycles at a time. Maybe a whole day will go if I want to run 1,000 cycles of an iteration. On a machine learning, we improved from that to a normal computing power to Excel. Today, with machine learning techniques, we may be able to do a million alternates in a matter of seconds or maybe a couple of minutes. And that essentially is allowing us to kind of have better understanding of the future and hopefully make a better decision. So I think that's where this whole story and then the whole point of machine learning and finance and mathematical techniques and tools. Because the other thing that we also, and then the other part is the quantitative finance, the other thing that we've also figured out is at some level, finance is as good as maths or any of it. And then most of the models that we today use in mathematical finance and quantitative finance are nothing new. If you actually think of the models in some form or the other existed in various other physical or mathematical disciplines for years. It's just that the application set has changed. Some of the boundary conditions have changed. Some of the conditions in which we run it have kind of changed. The interpretations, for example, take the simplest example. If I were to just give you, and then we can move on after that. If you look at any of the interest rate models, if you don't call them an interest rate model, those models are nothing new. Those models have existed in various things, in chaos theory, in physics, in biology, and all of that for over 150, 200 years. The application into finance, application to interest rate has happened of late over the last 25 odd years, maybe 30 years. But what is the key change? The key change is, for example, if I take a mathematical model and run the model and get some output, a negative output from a mathematical model is a perfectly relevant and acceptable answer. Why should a negative value be irrelevant? From a maths perspective. But the moment I say this is going to drive an interest rate process, then I have a problem, because what does a negative interest rate mean? Right, a negative interest rate per se does not have any major meaning, particularly if I'm driving or if I'm defining the nominal interest rate and I'm saying the nominal interest rate model-wise is coming out to be negative. I think there is a fundamental disconnect between the way interest rates are defined and the negativity in the interest rate. So does it mean the model is wrong? The answer is no. It's just the boundary conditions have to be set appropriately to kind of get that. So we're not really reinventing the wheel. We're not really kind of coming up with newer models. But we are saying, okay, this kind of operates in a certain domain with this kind of a framework, which is what are the conditions, and therefore that's kind of the broad argument. And when we couple the two together, our ability to expand and try out different things using machine learning, using AI in the mathematical quant finance space has just exploded, and that's what this whole story is. And I think we are just right now probably only at the tip of the iceberg in terms of the applications. I think as we go forward, both the whole genre of AI and ML is itself exploding as we speak. Newer applications are coming, and newer application in finance will come up, and this will kind of lead to many more alternates, many more options that kind of can come up in that space.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the overall overview. So let us get into, can you throw us a light on the growth and impact of machine learning in the finance industry currently?
I think there is a huge growth that's kind of seen because we're still, as I said, very early in very early days. Depending on which market you are in, you may be a little advanced, a little, catching up be happening. For example, if you are working in the US markets and are more developed markets, you're probably a little ahead of the curve. If you are working in markets like India, we're not laggards, but we are kind of catching up. But that's kind of the overall market development is like that. Our markets are on some counts we are doing much better, but on some counts we are catching up. So it's a function of that. But I think if I forget all of that, and if I just take the overall application of AI ML into financial markets, I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg. That's because it's as a process. 20 years back, if somebody talked about machine learning, I don't think anybody even knew what machine learning was. What was it? I mean, what the best we had heard was the early forms, which was then called was ANN, artificial neural networks, which was coming about in the late 90s and early 2000s. Today's machine learning and AI did not exist. So I think we're just about starting up. The good thing about this is, given the spread of it, the spread has been really fast. But having said that, it is also very early days where it is. I mean, it is not finance, but I'll give you an example. Just to understand how machine learning and AI is helping in the broader context of the societal development, and financial markets aren't any different, and that's also happening. But this is an example out of the financial market story. For example, we are now just about coming out of the impact of COVID and all of that. We all know that, and I'm not going to talk about that. I mean, there's no point. I mean, everybody's aware and then knows about it. But an interesting point happened. We obviously, thanks to medical prognosis, scientific developments, and all of it, we thankfully had or have a vaccine or a set of vaccines that have been developed against COVID. Right? I mean, let's not go down the route. We're not here to discuss which is more effective, who's done better, and all of that. That's not my point. But my whole question is that we've managed to, in the history of the world, the COVID vaccine has been the fastest from discovery to delivery thing. Right? Though it's still called an emergency use to full certification hasn't happened, but it's been the fastest. How has it been possible? And why has it happened? Historically, the whole process to run, you needed to do a lot of clinical trials and you needed to kind of run it. And therefore, the earlier one, prior to COVID, the earliest time to delivery of a vaccine was about 6 years, which was, I think, the polio vaccine or one of them. Most other vaccines have taken something like 10, 15, 20 years, in some cases even more, to kind of come up with a new vaccine. What did AI and ML do? Allow us to kind of try out this whole story across a much larger, unthinkable population base to look at what are the potentials and analyze that data to see what is happening. The same story is kind of happening in the financial market today when we talk about investment and algo trade and all of it. It kind of just allows you exponentially to evaluate all of that. You still have to train them because a machine is as good as you train them to. And therefore, we are kind of doing that catching up, saying, okay, we have this huge amount of data. How do we interpret the data? What do we do with this data? And we are playing the catch-up game. But the possibilities are kind of expanding in a limitless manner, and we really have a very large spectrum out there.
So how do you assess the robustness and stability of a machine learning model in a real-world financial environment?
Robustness and stability are very interesting, and talked about questions that I really do not have an answer at, even for regular, forget machine learning and otherwise. When an investment analyst tells you or gives you an advice that, okay, let's go and invest out here, and you do that, how certain are you in terms of that? It's basically a function of the past performance. How do you choose an investment analyst's advice and then follow that? How good has been the analyst in the past, and what are the factors that they're using to analyze this? These are the two prime drivers. The same story happens out here. Yes, we can do things which will kind of, we can do back testing to ensure that the model is stable and all that. And if those conditions hold good, the model is going to be stable going forward. However, please remember, there's always the unknown. So if I take the whole information world, the financial market information, any information world and financial markets, I can divide it into 3 segments: the known, the unknown, and the unknowable. So what happens is, the known set increases as we go forward. Collectively, the unknown and the unknowable decrease. But you can't get to a scenario where the unknowable goes to 0 or the unknown goes to 0. So there'll always be some random events where things will fail and the freakouts will happen. But the whole question is, can we find out more alternates, more choices? And that is the story. I mean, this is kind of, machine learning is helping us to, and with more and more data, it's kind of making us more stable as we go forward. But will we be in a perfectly 100% stable model which will never fail? The answer is no, we can never get there. If somebody says that, I think That's the biggest fraud that's being committed. What we are doing is, and then interestingly, the other problem is moving from a 50% accuracy to 90% accuracy is probably not that difficult. When you compare that with moving from a 90 to 95, or even a 95 to even just 96. So as you in the initial stages, we will have fast progress, but as we go forward, even for a marginal increase, there's a lot more effort that kind of goes into the whole process. And that's what is. So there will be things. Things will get more robust, will get more stable. But will we have a perfect, robust, and perfectly stable answer? The answer is never.
So now the topic of machine learning and artificial intelligence is trending everywhere. Anywhere, I mean website, anything we take, it is trending. So
Sure.
as a faculty and as a student, how do we, start getting into this kind of, machine learning and artificial intelligence in the, subject of finance, and how do we impart or set up a curriculum? Is it necessary to, teach programming languages to the management and commerce students to understand about these things? And how do we impart this machine learning as a curriculum
Okay,
to the students?
I look at it slightly differently, and I look at it by saying that, look, um, in some sense, machine learning, artificial intelligence is a tool that you are using, a tool on a basic problem. So unless students, and I'll come back to the programming language part in a second, but unless students and any user understands the basics, understands the foundation well, none of this is ever going to help. It'll be a black box. So the question is, the first question we need to address is, are we creating a set of data entry operators who will key in data into a black box and kind of get a screenshot as an output and present out thing? That's one way. But if you are trying to create a set of students and a set of professionals who will be able to decode the black box per se, and not on a daily basis, but at least if something happens, decode the black box. So in that process, then I think knowing the basics, knowing the fundamentals, there is nothing which can replace that idea. So I cannot because what is possible is things may be going good today. The problem of not knowing the basics is things may be going well, good today, going fine today, not a problem. There may be, but once you do a detailed analysis, you might just find out there are multiple problems that might be happening. Somehow they're working in opposite directions as of date, and therefore you're getting a result which is commensurate to what you, or which is kind of in sync with what you want, and therefore it's kind of coming out in that manner. One of them changes, and the whole thing simply breaks down, and then you don't know what's going on. So, therefore, just to use it in a black box is a very dangerous solution, which means that the first thing that anybody who wants to get into any of this, any field, whether it's finance and forget machine learning, all those are only top, but essentially they need to understand the basics. They need to be very strong on the basics. Machine learning per se is a tool on top. Today we are used, so it's like this. When I was a student, when I was not an undergrad, when I was a master's student, the programming language that most of us landed up using was Fortran 77, which then became Fortran 90. And some people could use C. Over periods of time, this has changed to today, various other things, to Python, to R, to S plus, to R, to MATLAB, to Python, to Java, to whatever else. And this, there's not going to be end to this. Today it's Python, tomorrow it might be some Anaconda, God knows what, and something else might come up. I really don't know. Web crawlers and all. These will keep on developing, but has the basic thing changed? The answer is no. So we need to be able to differentiate between the two. So if I were to look at it from a computer thing application, example, what are we trying to create in the process? Are we trying to create programmers? Are we trying to create people who can give the analytical and the inputs to a programmer to design it? So should I be able to write the algorithm? Should I be able to write the program? And I think the focus should be more in terms of writing the algorithm. Along the way, people will pick up some tools and some skills which will allow them to convert their algorithms into workable programs with particular, and that's what this will do. So I think from a teaching perspective, there is no substitute to teaching the basics the way we have done. And obviously there are changes and improvements that are happening, and that has to kind of be incorporated. Which language to teach? Should we teach? That depends. I think it is now imperative on students also to kind of figure out so to be able to apply this where they apply, and they will need to learn that. But if you focus if your focusing is based on just the programming language and the final tool, then my ability to course correct becomes very difficult. So again, just to give you an example, an analogy from a interest rate model, it's like the difference between no arbitrage, the equilibrium and the no arbitrage models. What do you want to calibrate? Do you want to calibrate the input or do you want to calibrate the output? The reason why equilibrium models are no longer used is because in equilibrium model you can only calibrate the output and not the input. So every time today's output I can calibrate, fine. But will the model therefore be usable in the future? The answer is no, because the calibration may go away. The whole no arbitrage class of models does exactly the opposite. You calibrate the input and let the output be a function of that. So basically, if I calibrate the input, then I don't have to worry about what the future is and is it real? Is it mapping backwards onto a realistic thing? Because it is mapping. It is started off with a realistic framework. So I think that is what the approach we should be talking about out here. That we still do the basics strong and make sure students and any user understands the basics very clearly. The other is a top-up tool which will come up in the process in any case.
So how do you stay updated on the latest developments and research in this field, given its dynamic nature?
So part of it is, I think, being active in the process. So I think it's important to keep on reading and, keep on being in the business. So, one of the most important things as an academic is to kind of be active in the research space, which basically means that you also have to read research papers. Today, it's easy to track what is happening because thanks to the information age and information content that we have, from figuring out what came in journals and then getting a hard copy that we used to do about 30 years back, even 25 years back. Today, I can kind of simply go into a Google Scholar or a Google search, and in a matter of seconds, I can kind of get many more people. So I think the ability to access information has increased, but the intent to access information needs to be there. So as I keep on telling all my students, and particularly my research students, that PhD is not an end. It's only a start of a journey. What it does is it just gives you a certification to be able to say that, okay, now you can do X, Y, Z. Not that, so, and I keep on saying this, and I'll risk saying it again here, that, people take in many cases, we see people take an awfully long time to do a PhD. And there is a implicit view that, okay, I have to do good work, I need to kind of spend a long time. Probably, yes. I'm not going to debate that. I'm not a believer of that, but I'll not debate that because people may agree, people may not. But my whole point is that don't make that the focus of your entire life. If you want to do something else, if you want to do good research, you'll have a life to kind of do that. So get your PhD done, get out and do that. But the point I'm trying to make in this is a lot of people, think reaction is, okay, now I've been done my PhD, maybe I've got whatever promotions I could get, because in an academic world, it's actually a very flat structure from a hierarchical perspective. In your entire life, you can aspire for 3 promotions. You can start as an assistant professor, associate, and full professor. After you become a professor, there's no, unlike a corporate world, it'll not keep you don't have to be promoted every couple of years. So therefore, once you reach there is always a potential problem that somebody might say, oh, look, I've already become a professor, so why do I need to do anything? What more will I achieve? The answer is, you will not achieve anything, probably financially, probably from a workspace perspective. But if you want to remain active, if you want to be still remain in that consideration zone of various things and all of that, you need to remain abreast. And therefore, you need to kind of keep reading continually, be attending conferences, engaging with people. Having research students is also very important, because through them you also get to know a lot more newer things, some things which you wouldn't have tracked. Because you have 2 or 3 research students who are working on, let's say, 3 different projects and things like that, you suddenly increase your bandwidth like 4 times, because you're doing whatever you were doing on your own, plus you have 3 other people kind of giving you. So that, I think these are very important things which academics need to pursue to ensure that they need. And there's no way you can afford to say, particularly the way, in today's context, where you can afford to just sit back and say, oh, I did this 25 years back or 30 years back, and that's it, I don't need to do any further. Because everything is available out there. Students will figure that out very quickly. So unless you need to kind of always be a step ahead of the students, by and large. There will be cases where you will not. And then but you should also have the ability to tell students, look, I do not know, but I'll figure it out and I'll come back. But on the whole, maybe 90-95% of the times, you need to kind of, because otherwise, why would a student come to you? Whether it's in a class, whether it's research, why would a student come to you? Because if the student believes that I can go online, I can download material, and that is more recent and more current than what I'm going to talk in class. And there's no real value add. Why should a student come to me? So I need to kind of, and then the job has become much more tougher because at one end we have to teach and we have to do things which are historical, the foundations, and students might think this is very old, but at the same time the whole challenge is to make sure that this kind of is relevant in the current times or in the future. So though the theory may be 50 years old, but how do you make it contemporary and relevant for the future? And that I think is the biggest challenge. The only way to do that is remain active, remain kind of engaged, read, network, collaborate. That's what it will take.
So you told about algorithm writing in the previous thing. So I mean, how different is algorithm practicing and algorithm trading, and how I mean, algorithm trading and machine learning is I mean combined, and what is the use of those things in the industry?
So algorithm writing is so difference. Okay, first point, there's no difference. I mean, at some level, there's no difference. Algorithmic trading, as we know today, is basically somebody writes the algorithm, somebody gives me the strategy. The strategy is the algorithm. The guy who's implementing it does not have to give me the strategy. The guy who's implementing it can take the strategy, puts it in a certain format, and runs the trade on the which is based on the machine on which it run the system and all of that. Everybody will have different systems, and therefore so it's like this. Like, for example, just think of it. All of us are using things, laptops and all of that. So you could type a document in let's say Word, Microsoft Word, and let's say it's a little more scientific, equation oriented thing. One could use Word and the equation editor to do that. One could use a software called LaTeX to do that. And there are other softwares also which does it, which are more geared towards addressing. So Word is very good when you have to write text. But if you have to kind of put in mathematical equations, well, yes, the equation editor does it, but it's kind of a bit messy things to play around. There are other softwares which are better prepared to address that kind of a thing, but it's not as user friendly probably as Microsoft Word. The question is, does the content, now let's say there are three of us driving, but there is doing the same thing. Does the content change? And the guy who's writing the content does not care whether the output is printed or used using a Word, using LaTeX or something else. So therefore, to me, the guy who does the algorithm or creates the algorithm is the guy who's creating the content. And then you have a set of programmers who doesn't need to know what the algorithm is. I mean, but who it's good if they know, but they don't need to know what the backend and what the thought process and how the algorithm has been devised. What that guy needs to know is, can I program that in a manner which the system I'm using understands and therefore translates this guy's ideas on paper into a programmed setup. Right? If you want to take an analogy, it's like this. If you're cooking, right, and if you take somebody's where's my thing? If you are cooking and I give you a sheet of paper with a recipe with absolute details and everything, and if you so the guy who's trading, the guy at the last end is the guy who has a piece of paper with all the details in it. That guy doesn't need to be a Gordon Ramsay or whosoever, a Michelin star chef, to figure out what goes into kind of creating this recipe. But I can take that cookbook, I can take that recipe, and I can probably try to replicate that. That is what the trading part of it. So both are needed, because just by writing it down and just by ideating, the trading will not happen. But just by able to trade and write this, the ideation will not happen. So both are needed in that context to kind of run that process. What does machine learning do in that argument? Machine learning kind of gives us that many more alternates and that many more choices to kind of run that and look at it. It also allows us, interestingly, two things it allows us to do. One, it allows us to simulate and therefore a priori figure out what are the things that could happen. So, when we take a decision, any decision, we always discuss and we always talk about, anybody, that where could we go wrong? As much as we could go right, where could we go wrong? Right? So now, humanly, you can only discuss that many alternates. The system will kind of discuss, because there are human biases, there are other limitations and other things, so we always kind of locked in that. The system does not have these biases unless you've input the biases. So therefore, the system is a little more, objective in that process and kind of gives you many more alternates. The second, and I think, or more probably the first, whichever way you want, but the other let's not rank it, but the other very important thing that the machine system gives me is speed. Because the human intelligence and the human system only can operate at a certain speed. Right? I mean, there will be that one-off exception in the world. There has been only one Shakuntala Devi that we've known of who's been able to beat computing systems. And in at least recorded history over the last 200, 300 years, there's been only one Shakuntala Devi, nobody else. All others, including Gary Kasparov, failed in front of Deep Throat, Blue Throat. What was that? Deep Throat? No, Blue Throat, or whatever the IBM's chess system that was developed. Because chess is a good example because it's your ability to plan that many or see the opponents that many moves forward, all the alternates, and then decide. Now, Gary Kasparov has been talked about as one of the greatest chess players the world has ever seen. And how was he great? Or how is he great? Because his ability to forecast and foresee the things in the future was far higher. His ability to compute quickly in that given time interval was much faster. The computer could do it faster. And that's what the benefit is. The machine learning will kind of give you that, and that marginal time advantage could be huge because in a financial market, there's always something called the first mover advantage. When I come in, if I'm the first guy, I make most of the money. You come in and replicate my strategy. Strategy is old. Everybody else in the system knows it. Therefore, you may not be able to make the money. So even if I gain like a nanosecond in that whole speed, there is money to be made. And that is what machine learning is kind of additionally doing in that process.
So to add on to this, today there is a API. There are a lot of API, a lot of working websites. They are giving APIs and free APIs. Now, as a trader's perspective, even today there are a lot of students actually trying on these APIs and they're writing their own strategies into that API and they're trying to build on their wealth. So, what is your take on this? How good is this API and how we can actually utilize it effectively?
You see, the answer to that, from my perspective, is this: that there are choices, there are alternates available. Some are free, or most of them are free. Some could even be paid, marginal cost. It's not a question of what is available. The question of that is when a student uses this, when you and I use this, how much do we understand at what is going on, right? And therefore, the strategy on top of it. If we understand what is going on and then run that, I think then we are safe. The biggest challenge in most of these cases are that people don't really understand what is going on and they just simply jump into it by saying, oh, there is this fancy tool and let's do that. The question is, does it suit you? Because you see, a very important development happened in the markets, not now, about 15 years or so back. But that is, again, today we're doing it as a checkbox, but the intent behind that is what the whole logic is. So today when you make an investment, forget whether you're using AI, ML or traditional. When you do an investment with a bank, with an investment house, whatever, you have to sign off a KYC document and also the document which basically says that all the risks and the relevant factors have been explained to you in detail and you've read and understood that. And RBI mandated this, and then this is mandated across the world. We all do it. We simply do the tick box. The investment advisor gives it to you. You simply sign it at the bottom. How many of us have actually read through that fine print? And more importantly, if we read through the fine print, how many of us would really understand the legal language that goes into the fine print? So it's a very badly implemented model, and it is to protect some entities from legal thing. But the intent behind that was very well thought because in 2004, around 2004-5, banks in India sold derivative products to a set of people, actually down south in Tirupur and all, which was not even needed. And nobody knew why those were sold and all of that. Now, obviously, realize a bank has a better answer, a better analytical ability, and this is before AI/ML days also, of the financial market than an ordinary person like you and me, or in particular, this was a set of garment exporters in Tirupur who could understand the garment business, but do they really understand the exchange rate business and exchange rate movement between the JPY and the CHF? I really have my doubts. Yet these products were sold. Landed up in a lot of mess. It's still in court and Supreme Court and all of that. Post that, when RBI said is now if you want to sell something or if you want to do it in a trade, you need to explain this in full detail. And how do you get that? Get this document signed. We've moved to that, but the question is it been implemented? So the story in the API case is exactly the same. There are APIs and there are APIs that are available. Question is, does the guy who's using it understand which API he or she is choosing, and what is the implication, what are the risks they're taking? And I think if they understand that from a basic perspective, then I think this is a good alternate, that they're saving time. They don't really need to develop something from scratch. They may develop something on top of that, with the incremental part, which is good. But in most cases, in my understanding, is people don't really understand what they're doing. It goes back into the same friends and family kind of story. You say you've used it, she says she's used it, so I just get influenced, and some kind of an influencing model. And I know recent things. This is kind of not maybe in the API space, but in a larger, but broadly in that space, SEBI has now gone after, and the courts have also gone after this YouTube influencers. I really don't understand what is the competence they have, and they do seem to make a lot of money. But I think that's one of the biggest, kind of fraud schemes that are being perpetuated in the country. Which what is the lodge? What is the rationale that these guys have? And what is their understanding and ability to kind of run those influencing schemes?
So, what are your opinions on high frequency trading?
My opinion. Well, I don't think it matters, because I don't think we have a choice of. I know the regulator doesn't like it, but it's reality. See, once you've created so much of data and you've created the computing power, whether I like it or not, it's going to happen. So I might as well embrace it. I might as well work around to protect myself and look at that. The problem of high frequency trading is, in a country like ours, where connectivity is not uniform, and we've seen, what we saw as the NSE co-location case. One part of it is the illegality. So the NSE co-location case was basically very simple. Some companies had the right, was given the option, or one particular company with access to insiders within the NSE, they did not sell any data. So it was not a classic fraud case where NSE gave away data and all of that. NSE did a very small preferential treatment for them. And what was that? They allowed that company to house their servers in a space which was proximate, where the proximity to the NSA server was very low or very close. So it's like this: you are two in the same scenario. There are two servers which are right next to each other, and therefore the communication time distance between the two is extremely short, whereas the third and everybody else was outside the NSA building somewhere else, and therefore there was a marginal additional time that kind of came in. That created the co-location just because they were getting now an additional advantage. Now, we need to kind of address those things, but given the amount of data that we have created, and given that there is an opportunity to play around and make money through that, and all of that, I think this will happen. Naturally, this will happen. It will be a shame if that doesn't happen. So HFT is there to stay. We need to be realistic. We need to be able to realistically manage it. We need to be transparent. But yeah, there are operational challenges. Do we have uniform connectivity? Does that affect it? Things like that. So I think those are challenges that need to be addressed. But HFT is something which is there to stay. There's nothing that you can do by we can't wish away HFT. So we've moved way past that.
All right. So now let's say in the high frequency trading, what are the regulatory frameworks still we are working on where our country has to be improved? And also, there are a lot of small players. They keep saying that I'm into HFT, and actually, if you give me so much money, I can build your wealth so much. So these kind of information is also coming, and there are a lot of common man actually believe on this. So what is your take on that? And
So let me address the second part first, and then I'll come
Yes,
back to the first
sure.
part. I think anybody who says I will give you this amount of return, and obviously these returns are fairly juicy returns. Otherwise, nobody will. If you say that I'm going to give you 7%, 8% return, the bank itself gives me about this. The interest rates have gone up a little bit, so we get about 7%. You're not going to really advertise that, and there's no incentive to take the risk. The incentive comes in if you're going to come and tell me that, okay, if you try to tell the world, you know what, you give me this amount of money, I'll give you a 25% return. The moment something like this has been talked about, I think that should be the first alarm bell, because this can't happen. This can't happen on a sustainable basis. And if it is happening even for a short period of time, it is probably a precursor to a Ponzi scheme. So fundamentally, people should not And that is what I'm trying to say earlier when I said about the YouTube influencing model. People tend to get influenced by these kinds of statements. I think one of the basic things that we always said in financial markets, irrespective of regulation, irrespective of country, don't do it if you don't understand it. Do what you understand. If you don't understand the markets, go and keep money in the bank. If you don't understand markets, don't do derivatives. Don't do HFT. Do normal equity. Don't don't do an effective trade. Do a hold to maturity, buy and hold strategy. So buy a few blue chip stocks that you think, hold them. You don't need to exit. There are different strategies for different kinds of investors. So I think the first and the most important thing is to understand your own risk profile and your own requirements and what you need to do and why you're doing it. That will define this kind of thing. And to the common man, I would say, like, simple story: do not do something you don't understand. Do not jump into it just because it seems, because things cannot, if it was so simple, why are the rest of the people such big fools that they are also not doing it? That's the first thing. And therefore I think, it's more for people to understand. I think in that context the regulator has been trying, and the regulator will have to, but this is an unending process. We'll have to keep trying to kind of educate through investor education, through public interest adverts and whatever else, through schools. And I think one of the most important things we should do, and it happens in about 16 states in the US. It's still not mandated here. I mean, I think it's very important in India to do that. Before I get into the regulation of HFT per se, and this is actually at a much broader level, not just HFT, is basic understanding of financial. I mean, a basic financial understanding amongst high school kids. One of the reasons that we see the problem today is because today your income potential is suddenly gone up, which is good for the economy, which is very good, and I think it's absolutely positive. Coupled with the fact that the liabilities that these youngsters are coming up with, particularly family liabilities, have come down. So there is a lot more, as one would call, consumption surplus that these kids are left with. Think of it, 30, 40 years back, if you the first of your salary, you had to pay not pay, but you had to give up certain part. I mean, depending on individuals, but it was not uncommon in India to think that, when a son or a daughter, particularly a son, and I'm sorry, ma'am, but that's how the gender specific country that we live in. If a son starts working, at least a significant part of that income would have to be paid to the family or given to the family to take care of the family costs. That has started changing, both gender-wise as well as society-wise. So today, there's probably, at least in urban India, the gender divide is far lower, and I'm particularly, happy about that. The second thing I think more important that's happened is, today our parents don't really depend on what money you give them to survive. They have made sure that they can survive on their own and all of it. Yes, we do give money and all of that, but it is not as if the survival depends. My expenditures have not suddenly gone through the roof. I mean, expenditure has increased, but not really an explosion. So suddenly what's happened? I have this huge amount of consumer surplus, as I call it, or as economists would call it. And this money is going to go into all these kinds of things. And that is where people are kind of going, oh, now I can make a lot more money, let me do that. So my whole advice to them is, these kids need to understand, and therefore they need to be trained to understand financial markets and financial. It's a basic financial literacy argument, whatever we call it. Should be done at school level. Forget even college. Should be done at school level. And should be made mandated as a part of their, I don't know, whether class 10 or class 12. You may not put it as a percentage. You may not, I know in India, everything is driven by percentages and all that. You may not want to put it as a percentage, but, they need to do at least a pass-fail kind of a thing, that everybody is at least financially literate. Financial literacy is not just knowing to know your, I have had friends 30, 35 years back, when we first went to, close to 30 years back now, when we went to college, for the first time, this guy was kind of, at a hostel. When I was doing a master's, for the first time, we were all out of home and we were staying in IIT hostel. The first day, the first month, this guy had to pay his, we all had to pay our mess bills. And there was no UPI and all. The only way you could pay was check. This guy wrote a check and gave it. 2 days later, this guy is jumping all over the place, shouting, I have paid. Why is my name on the board? Because his name was up on the board as a default. I have already given it and all that. There was money, and there is money in my account. My father has, see my bank passbook has so much money, and how can it default and all that? after a little bit of a thing, we cooling down and all, we found out this guy hadn't signed the check because he didn't know the check had to be signed. And definitely the check didn't get encashed, and therefore he was a defaulter. So that is a level, and I'm not exaggerating. Even today, if I go and find out, vast majority of Indian kids do not understand financial literacy, and that would not be a new example even today. And therefore, if you don't understand, and suddenly somebody says, you know what, I'll give you 50% return, or not even 50%, you give me 1 lakh, I'll give you back 2 lakhs in 1 year. Suddenly, I'm going to be enticed by that. I think, therefore, we need to understand financial literacy, and that's where investor education and regulators should actually work a lot more. Specifically with HFT, the regulator is trying to make sure that we can't, as I said, we can't stop HFT. We can at best delay it for a little while, we can't stop it. And I think everybody in the system understands that. But what the regulator and the players are together, the service providers and all of them are trying to work together is to say, how can I ensure that it is a level playing field for everybody? How can I ensure that there is no preferential treatment for A over B and things like that? And that is where, and how do I ensure, because doing that would ensure or meet the basic requirement of regulation, which is not individual protection, but the systemic protection and the market protection. Because if I am to gain over the two of you and I gain all the time, at some point, why would people come to you and the market would collapse? For the market to survive, all of us need to exist, and the regulator's job is to ensure that. And that's what the regulator is trying to do, to make it fair, transparent, and all of that in that context.
So, what advice would you give to the students and professionals looking to enter the field of quantitative finance with an emphasis on machine learning? Are there any specific skills or knowledge areas that are particularly valuable?
So my one-line advice, which I started off also, is to say, be strong on your basics. Machine learning and all this is important, and I know we're talking about machine learning, but fundamentally be strong on your basics. Understand what is going on. You should be able to use a standard, and Excel, what used to be pen and paper in our times when we were kids and when we were growing up, has kind of become Excel today. Any problem you should be able to kind of handle and show me in a limited manner on Excel that this is what it is, because that is what allows you to understand the basics. Taking it from Excel to a machine learning framework to a particular user interface output and all of that is only a natural progression on that. But the understanding. So the first thing I would advise anybody to say is, please understand that so you should be, if things go wrong, or if somebody were to say, you should be able to pick up a paper, you should be able to pick up a board or a laptop and show, okay, this is the input, and look, step by step, this is what's happening, and this is what is kind of coming up. Or if it is not happening, then this is where the breakdown is happening. So that is the first thing that I would advise. The other advice is, while some of the basics will not change, but developments will happen, so you need to be aware of what new developments are happening. But more importantly, machine learning and AI are very new tools and techniques that are kind of being evolving. And we are nowhere close to a kind of a saturation point. We are way too early. If you look at the curve, we are just probably at the start point. So every day, every month, there are going to be new developments and new things, which means that the need to remain updated and abreast with that is all that more important for you to remain contemporary and current in the environment. So therefore, make sure that you keep track of that, whether it's by reading, be it by doing upskill courses, by kind of engaging in engaging in other activities, think gamification, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is, you need to kind of keep engaged, not just at what you know, but what are the developments, and because that is what will kind of help you. The core might remain constant, but the applications will keep on changing, keep on increasing. And you need to be kind of constantly updating yourself through whatever means to ensure that you remain current in the system.
All right, sir. But how a faculty has to enable themselves to teach subjects like quantitative finance, algorithm trading. So
I think the answer to that is the same as what I said. Like, you have to upgrade, because all of us. Okay, there is a basic input side that has to be there. So I think that is a starting point. But I think most faculty are already, who are teaching or who aspire to teach, have already done that. So it's not as if the basic does not exist. Right? So basics people are. But I think their need to kind of be a step ahead is kind of look at it. They need to kind of understand. They also need to understand and be able to explain the pitfalls, the challenges, the problems that might happen in all of this, in kind of looking at that, to taking care of the future and And it's not just the output. See, an user, an investor, may only be interested in the output. For a faculty, I need to be able to look at the output, and if the output is not as per expectation, I should also be able to go back, as I said, decode the black box, explain why it's not happening. And the black box will still be working fine. But certain assumptions that you've made may actually have changed, because that's the dynamic nature of the environment. And be able to correlate this. And I think that is where the onus of the faculty is a lot more, because they need to kind of also be able to do these correlations and explain why is it not working, and what changes, what tinkering needs to be done, and how does it move forward. So the process per se is the same. Keep at it, upskill, upgrade yourself continuously, but also upgrade yourself to the extent that not just look at the outcomes, but also look at, I think, not just look at the positive outcomes, more importantly, also look at the negative outcomes and rationalize why that has happened. So that from that rationalization, you're also developing a whole set of what should I say, a whole set of points or information which you should not do. Right? It's very important to understand what you should do to go forward and make profits, and understand and do whatever. And as a faculty, as a teacher, it's very important for us to tell our students what they should do. But it's also equally important, if not more, to tell them what they should not. So that's what I'll advise them.
So how can researchers contribute to the ongoing dialogue and advancement in the field of quantitative finance and machine learning? Like, are there any specific areas where more research is needed, or any unexplored area?
Okay. Every area has a lot of unexplored areas. So it's your creativity where it will take you. As simple as that. So I think the answer to that, the last part is, there are unexplored areas everywhere. Some will work, some will not. Some may take a long time to happen, but there are unexplored areas. People should choose that based on their interest, based on also their temperament. Because some people fundamentally are okay to slog at something for the next 10 years for that greater glory and prize. And some people also need instant gratification. So I need to be recognized, and some people might need to be recognized every day, every week, kind of thing. Some people are okay to kind of work behind the scenes, but work on something more, in a manner which will kind of come in. So I think it's individual driven. In terms of how do you keep? So sorry, what was the first part? The first part was what research, right?
Researcher contribute, like, is
Research
there any?
contribution. So now again, not with no disrespect, majority, I think as a researcher, one needs to kind of be clear as to why you are in that field and why you're doing the research. You could actually you could be very focused on high quality theoretical research, but please remember, high quality theoretical research will take a fairly long time for you to identify, deliver, and the impact be felt. If you are on the other hand, I think there's a very important zone out there to kind of work on practical problems which one can show, so which has a direct linkage and applications which have linkages in the market and all. I think a large amount of research should happen out there. It's happening, but I think that is the problem. There is, it's kind of becoming, people are taking the lowest hanging fruit, that I just look at a survey, I look at something in a small segment, and then I do something. I think we need to up the game and say how generalizable is it and things like that, and a larger population and things like that. That's what we kind of need to look at. The second thing also I would argue, and one I think you also mentioned that in policy and all, I think it's important to also understand and articulate that as a part of as a researcher, to articulate that from a part of research. What is the practical implication? What is the policy? So if I follow this, if I'm a practitioner, what is my benefit? If I'm a policy maker, how does it help me design a better policy? Just a mathematical analysis, some regression, some stuff, and some numbers is good, but it's not. It's a means. It's not an end in itself. If you want to take the research to a logical conclusion, you should be able to then correlate this to what are the practical implications, what is the policy implications, where is the gap, and which gap is this development going to help. So I think that articulation, so treat it as a continuum and not as an end by itself, just the research. So the researchers are feed into a lot of these things that will kind of happen.
How, econometrics and machine learning in finance, how it is differently applied, and what extent, econometrics and machine learning is applied?
No, I don't think it's differently applied. I think Econometrics is what? If you look at the definition of econometrics, econometrics is defined as measurement in economics. Right? And you're using the same tools to measure finance as a branch of economics or a broader, job, in the largest ecospheres, it's a branch of economics. So you're kind of just saying, well, I'm measuring finance now. It is not different. Yes, as I said, the measurement techniques might be different. Some cases, negativity will not be allowed. Some cases, some other things will not. I mean, doesn't make sense, and therefore it's constrained to that. So I think it's not any different in that context. So some have longer gestation, some have shorter gestation, and things like that. So those minor corrections are all that kind of come in, but the process is not any different. The tools and techniques are not any different. What does machine learning do? Same story. It is learning from the past, it is using for the future, and it is using for a larger space. So I think your ability to kind of now magnify your measurement techniques over a larger space is all that's kind of driving the process. That's
So for a student and maybe a faculty who's coming up, you advise that they should go through both the process, that they should learn the econometrics and come to machine learning, or it is directly, is it okay to learn the machine learning?
I have been saying this, basics is most important. I would always say that they should be, see, if I were to make a hire, right, I would not hire somebody who doesn't know basics. I am okay to hire somebody who doesn't understand machine learning, because if you know the basics, you can go and understand machine learning in today's context tomorrow and you can apply it. But if you do not know what the basics are, right, you will not be able to. You might know the machine learning a little bit, but that will not help you know the be able to apply it, and you will be stuck with it, and you'll not be able to do much with it. So I think you need to kind of be able to know the basics. And I would always recommend, please know the basics. This is the topic. So in terms of, again, if you're doing a food, it's like garnishing on the top. You can garnish however much you like, but if your base food is bad, no amount of garnish is going to help you. On the other hand, if your base is good, even if the garnish is slightly off, people will not, you can very easily improvise that and figure out what to do.
So how is machine learning used in pricing the options, or how is machine learning used to hedge?
Same thing, right? So what do you do? When you price an option, what are you doing? Your basic problem is you find an expected value of ST, which is nothing but the expected value of the spot at a future point in time. Now, how do I find that? If I ask you, you can give me an estimate, but how do you know? How do we know? I mean, and how do you give the estimate? You choose a set of alternates mentally or otherwise, and you say, okay, this is what my best estimate is. Machine learning is doing the same thing. Look, it's looking at historical data, it's training itself, it's learning from the past, and estimating a very large. So if I could mentally do maybe 100 alternates and choose from 100, the machine learning process may be looking at 1,000,000 alternates and choosing from the 1,000,000. Therefore, the possibilities increase, and therefore you get a better choice. Same with a hedge decision. What is a hedge? It is basically, the strategy is one part. That's the strategy. But why do I want to hedge? Because I believe some adverse issue can happen in the future, and therefore I want to cover against that. And essentially, in simple terms, I'll suffer a loss. I can potentially suffer a loss in the future. I'm trying to hedge against that. So therefore, what is the extent of the loss? What are the causes, and what can happen? Machine learning helps me identify that better. And if I can identify that better, I can form a better structured strategy to address that. That's where it helps.
So what are like some common machine learning algorithms used for time series forecasting in finance?
There are a lot of them. I think the most common ones that we keep on using, not just for time series, but I would kind of not. I don't want to get into the regular time series because I think there are more, and I wouldn't know. But in the financial market story, we use all these machine learning things like the random forest, the nearest neighborhood, and all these kind of things. I think these are the two most common ones that are kind of used. But there are many more that are also there.
So, we spoke about derivatives. So I just wanted to understand. There are complex derivative products like CDS, CDOs, credit default swaps. So whether machine learning or artificial intelligence, how much these applications are there in the complex derivatives, and what is the impact of machine learning on these complex derivatives?
Answer again is very, very straightforward, and I think that we've been talking about this all through the last hour or so. The complexity is not the issue per se. The complexity is an issue, but not from machine learning, because finally the machine will do what you train the machine to do. So if you can break down the complexity into a deliverable model, it will do it. So I think the complexity is more in that context and than machine learning per se. Machine learning is an application, right? Machine learning is no more than an application. So it'll get you data you based on an application that you're using. So your ability to break down the complexity in a conceptual manner is what will drive the whole equation, however complex the product is. How does it help? Again, the same story. Now I'm going to look at alternates for the future based on past information and my current alternates. Um, the ability to get that data, the ability to assimilate that in. So my model may be there. The model is dependent on inputs. The input sources are there, but how many can I humanly process in a defined time interval? The machine will do it at a much larger scale, depending on the power of the machine and different approaches that you're taking, and that's what will kind of drive the process.
So what are some best practices for backtesting machine learning models in finance?
I think there's only one. I mean, I don't know about that. I don't have an answer because I don't really use much of that. But I have one answer to that. I mean, and this is my stock answer to any similar issue that comes up. I think the ability to randomly take a process through from start to end through a machine learning outcome and the ability to replicate that in a standardized pen and paper Excel based approach and map the outcomes, and if I can map it perfectly and see that what is happening, I think that is one. I mean, for anything that you do at random, one should kind of do that. It should not be the first one, it should not be the last one should be able to do that at random at different points in time and see if the results, because you're getting results, and the question is, has the machine gone rogue? The only way to understand if the machine has gone rogue is if I do it myself. Pen and paper, or Excel, as we said, or whatever, some tool like that, where I have everything in front of me and there is no machine system that I'm using, which I cannot otherwise replicate manually. Am I matching it? And if it is matching, then the machine is fine. If it is not, then there's something going on in the system, and then we need to kind of. So my best practice is my answer to anybody who wants to do a best practice model in this is do this randomly as a hygiene check, and not like Monday morning 9 o'clock. I'll do that. Do that on Monday morning 9 o'clock this week, but maybe next week you should do it on Wednesday afternoon, Friday evening. I don't know, whatever random days, because it is not as if the prop system will only fail at one point in time and work fine at all other points in time. So you need to have a randomized model in that process to kind of do that.
So what are the specific cases or applications where machine learning has a transformative impact on financial analysis, maybe risk management and trading strategies?
I don't know what's transformative out here. I don't know what it means by saying transformative influences or impact. But I think machine learning has an impact across trading, has an impact across anything to do with markets. See, wherever I need more data, wherever I need faster computing, wherever I need a mechanism by which I can incorporate all of that into a thing and also kind of understand that in that fashion and replicate it. Machine learning has had an implication, and I think that's all I can say about that.
So can you provide some insights into the future trends and innovations at the intersection of quantitative finance and machine learning?
So, first of all, I do not think there is an intersection of quantitative finance and machine learning. I would always repeat, and I would keep on saying machine learning is a layer on top of quantitative finance to make it presentable, have a better interface with the rest of the world. What are the future innovations? I think a lot of it is happening. So interest rate movements, or ability to predict better interest rates, ability to predict crop prices, interlinking, for example, in commodity markets and crops, and that too in equity. What is happening in the, let's say, the meteorological side, rainfall data, and how can I incorporate that into agricultural output to the equity prices and the rest of the economy. So I think these linkages, which we think exist, but we've always found it difficult to incorporate because our ability, see, in some sense, when we look at a product, it's easy for us to visualize a product in 2 dimensions, which we all know. we can go up to, it is easy for us to draw in 2 dimensions. It is not that difficult for us to visualize it in 3 dimensions. All products are in 3 dimensions, the laptop, the glass, the whatever. But we know theoretically that n dimensions are possible. Can we visualize n dimensions? The answer is no. I mean, an average person will not be able to visualize n dimensions. The same problem happens here. All of these linkages are there. Can we incorporate them in one single way to kind of do that? The answer is yes, we should be able to in an ideal world. Practically, we find it very difficult to do that. Machine learning allows us to expand the horizon and therefore kind of gets you a better, a well-rounded view on that story. So that's something that kind of has an implication on that. And those are, so, and that's just one example. We could kind of look at things like, I don't have an exposure, let's say, in an African nation. I'm a producer of a product. I don't have any exposure in Africa. So, okay, take it. I am an investor in a company who does not have who produces a certain product, but doesn't have any exposure in Africa. Let's say Africa is a certain market where I don't have any exposure. Now there is another company, nothing related to me, not even in this country, maybe in some other obscure part of the world, which is creating the product and creating a market in Africa. And does that have an impact on my business? Now, you might think it's like, why am I linking it up? Maybe they don't, but maybe they do. And can I incorporate that into as an investor, finally, at the end of the day, can I incorporate all that information into my decision process? That's what, this is an example, some of the new frontiers that you can think of. So the limits, so the boundaries are limitless. And therefore, all of that can kind of be brought in that fashion.
So how blockchain has an impact on finance, and what are the uses of blockchain?
I think blockchain has had a better impact, and I think it's a very positive development that has happened in that context, because I'm not talking about bitcoins and all. That's a different story. But if you go back to the technology of bitcoins, which is blockchain, one of the most important things that blockchain does is this whole argument about distributed ledger technology, DLT. And one of the important things is that kind of creates a whole chain of action. So basically, to replicate things, to go back and track things, there is a whole chain that kind of exists. There's a better understanding. There's a better history and all that. So to that extent, I think blockchain is and it has also helped potentially digitize and do a lot of other things. So I think that is a very positive impact. So unfortunately, in the last few years, blockchain has been kind of synonymously used with the entire cryptocurrency world, which be it Bitcoin, be it Unamoney, whatever else, Digicoin, Dogecoin, and all of that, whatever. But I think it has been hijacked, and because some of these have not looked at very favorably across various places, people have also painted the blockchain technology or blockchains per se with the same brush. I think it's very important to differentiate between the two. It's like blockchain is a technology which is extremely good and useful and can actually provide a lot more benefits to the markets as a whole. Does it automatically translate to a cryptocurrency and a benefit? That's a completely different story to kind of talk about.
To add on to this, today there is NFT and DeFi, decentralized finance, and blockchain are cryptocurrencies. So now there is an asset class. Do you consider this cryptocurrency as an asset class? And
personally, NFT and all is okay. NFT, CBDC, these are kind of okay, because at the end, there's a fundamental problem of cryptocurrencies in the way we know it today. Because the question is, when you talk about any other currency, any other asset, there is a physical asset that backs it, be it the government, be it an asset. In a cryptocurrency, if a system fails, who is backing it? I still haven't understood that, and therefore there's a real asset problem. So should in cryptocurrencies be considered an alternate asset class? I would not say no to it, but I would also be careful in terms of how much of my portfolio mix should I put in out there, because that kind of is it a black hole which will suck it out in that event. For the other ones, be it NFT, be it CBDC, be it other asset classes, I think it's an interesting thing, and I think with the legal framework, the regulation, and the central bank backing and all of that, I think these are definitely alternate investment classes. Having said that, the primary condition should always be that I should only go and invest in there if I understand what that is, not just because it's a fad to invest out there. Not just because my friends or my family or somebody else I know or an influencer tells me go and invest there. I should invest in it only once I understand what is there, what is in it for me. Is it a good fit for me? Is it a good fit for me? And therefore, should I take that call?
Let's say take this NFT, non-fungible tokens. How important to the finance and the finance domain and financial industry, and how we can impart that as a curriculum or knowledge to the students on NFT and blockchain.
So I think the first thing one needs to understand and tell the students is the technology behind, again, which is the basics, is the technology behind NFT, the technology behind blockchains. The applications come later, and then there are some positive applications, some applications, and let's not call it positive, but some applications which are kind of disputed. Because going forward, one never knows that cryptocurrencies become legal, and then saying it is an illegal active application is unfair. So at this point, I would argue it's a disputed application. But there are some fairly accepted legal applications are there. But I think fundamentally people need to understand the technology which goes behind how does the blockchain work, what is it, how does the record keeping happen, how does the record remain in the system, how does the blockchain transfers happen. So how do I, if I'm running a blockchain and you're running a different blockchain, how do the blockchains interact with each other, how does the information transfer happen, and the rest of it is what kind of drives the process.
Very importantly, now DeFi, there is a transformation about DeFi. I mean, DeFi may overtake the banking system. So there are a lot of papers on that. So what is your take on that? How DeFi is going to have an impact on the banking system or in the financial system?
I don't buy the argument that it will take over. But I think, banking also has evolved. This is one new evolution, and things will, it is not that it is going to be completely, not everything is bad. So again, as I said, just to use the example that the discussion we were having is literally half a minute back. Your blockchains. People came to know blockchains because of the cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in particular. Before that, nobody really, the technology, and then people said, okay, what's the technology? Similarly, today, any development will have some good things. I think the banking system will adapt to that, will kind of take it on board and take it forward and address that in that manner.
So do you think the bankers will be having a real challenge because of DeFi?
There is a challenge to survive every day, so I don't see what's new in that. And it's a survival of the fittest. Unless you upgrade, unless you are fit, you will not survive. And that's been the story is the same. Forget all of this. Just look at the banking system in India. Who would have thought that a public sector behemoth like State Bank of India would today become a digital bank that it has become and serve everybody? 10 years back, nobody could have thought that SBI would. When people talked about digital, those days, internet banking and all, people only talked about ICICIs and HDFCs of the world, and maybe a couple, cities and Amexes. Public sector banks and SBI in particular were nowhere in the scene. They realized that for them to survive, at least in a certain geography and a certain segment, they had to move up, and they took up the challenge. And today, they're as good a digital bank as most other banks in the country. And yet they have this very varied, and for them it is a huge challenge. So challenges will drive them to that. And if somebody can't, they will be taken over by somebody else, because I won't say banks would fail, but they would probably be taken over by somebody else. There will be mergers. We've again seen that in the public sector space. Some banks could not move up, could not meet some of the challenges of the market, and then you had the whole bank reorganization, and then the combination of these banks, and then this amalgamation of these banks and all of that. So some developments would happen.
So what is the reason in India why they're not legalizing or not allowing people to trade on cryptocurrencies, and why India has to find out Lakshmi as a cryptocurrency in India?
So I think most countries in the world don't allow you to trade in cryptocurrency in any case. There are very few countries which allow, where Venezuela and one or two other places where cryptocurrency is legal. I think the fundamental problem is that what is the basis? If you let people trade and then people lose, who's going to, today when you trade on equity and it lose, or on currency, the regulator still has some control and then can come in and try to protect. So when a bank failure happens, So think of it, when Yes Bank failure was about to happen 2-3 years back, or the PMC failure happened, the regulator could step in and try to protect it. Now, if it's a cryptocurrency, we have no control. So how does the regulator? I mean, at the end of the day, the investor is a guy who does not really, who's then going to come cry. I mean, when the going is good, we'll want the benefit, but when it is bad, then we'll come crying to the regulators and I've lost money. How does the regulator step in? So I think that's why they're not really, and I don't know what the regulatory basis would be, because the whole argument of the cryptocurrency is where it is based. Where is it based? Nobody really knows. So what kind of regulation will it subject itself to? So I think we do not have any understanding of that, which is why it's not going to be. I mean, I would find it very difficult for any country. As I said, 1 or 2 countries have done that. They've had their own needs and own requirements. Most of the major economies have not done it, and that's why that's where it stands in India. And I think it will see. We've kind of come up with a via media solution where we've kind of said, we've not explicitly said it's illegal, but what we said is transferring money. So we have put impediments into people kind of doing that, but we've not really defined it as illegal. So what we're trying to say is that we're going to stop people from, we don't want to declare this as illegal because that doesn't solve the problem. We are going to kind of play it around by making it difficult for people to kind of access that system.
On top of this, introduction of derivatives in crypto is another thing. So
No,
can
I mean, I have nothing. I mean, I said, I don't know.
Okay. So, what are some ethical considerations and potential biases associated with using machine learning in finance?
I think the primary ethical bias is how do you train the thing, and you need to be as objective and as broad based, because if your own biases do get into that thing, then there might be a problem in that. But I think that's what, and the usual ethics things would apply. But I think a little more is to kind of say that, okay, one has to kind of make it so objective that even my own biases don't inadvertently also spill over into this space.
So, can you discuss the challenges and limitations of applying machine learning in financial modeling?
This is what we've been saying. I've been saying all the time that you can apply machine learning, but if you don't understand it, you don't know what's going to happen. And the biggest challenge is the inability to understand. I mean, inability of most people to understand what is going in. So it's like you're really throwing into a black box and thinking that a positive outcome is going to happen. Is it going to happen? Well, if it happens, very good. You're lucky. If it doesn't, the problem is then I don't know what to do, and that's because that's the biggest challenge that I have, and that's the whole problem. And it's not just about machine learning; it's about everything, right? If I don't know what's going to happen, I mean, things might just work out in my favor because of other reasons, and I might be lucky to get there. But chances are that it's not going to be lucky every time. It's going to fail, and the problem is again the Ponzi problem. The first time you put things in, it's small. So if it fails, you probably wouldn't mind much. If you're lucky the first time, the second time, what that means is that now you start believing, and the bias comes in because you start believing that you know the system, and therefore you put in a lot more. There's a lot more at stake as you go forward. And the moment the stake is higher, and if that time it fails, then suddenly it's kind of a much larger unmitigated disaster that you're exposed to.
So, what is the growth? For example, there are a lot of companies has come with wealth management companies which introducing artificial intelligence, and actually, now students also now looking into those kind of jobs. Those kind of companies to get into a job. Now, as a student perspective, if the student is from management and commerce side, how he can develop himself to get into those kind of jobs? Either he has to be definitely he has to be strong at the basics, and how he can actually work out to get into those kind of companies where the wealth management using AI or machine learning, this kind of companies.
I think that's a very fundamentally wrong argument to have. AI is not going to get them a job, at least a finance job. An AI or an ML action will get them an IT job, IT programming job. If that's what your students want, they can go and do that. That does not help out here. The job is based on the core finance, and therefore, whether it's wealth management, whether it's insurance, whether it's banking, whether it's equity analyst, the core has to be strong. Yes, they also need to know a little more on the core where they can apply, and that's where machine learning will come in. But if anybody thinks that because of machine learning they're going to get the job, and that's what is going to drive them, I think that's the biggest mistake that they would be doing. even if they get one job, even if they get the first job, they'll not be able to survive there because they will not know what is going on. They will be dependent on others to tell them what is going on. And why would I? And it's much easier for me realize as I go forward, knowing the basics. It's much easier for me to just pick up some tools here and there and apply it. It's very difficult to pick up the basics. So very soon they'll become redundant in their organization, and because they're redundant in the organization, they've also kind of outlived the tools that they knew. They'll not be employable elsewhere. So I think, from a student's perspective who's going out there into the employment market, I think core is what will drive them.
So, any specific study material or lecture or anything, any course that you recommend for newbies to start with?
See, I don't think there's anything that one recommends or one would want to recommend to anything, because I think it's very evolving and all of that. I think some of the things that people should, based on their interest, they should track, and they should have a wider interest, because one of the things that most people tend to believe and have these days is they don't really read widely, they don't really track widely, they don't know what's going on in the outside world. And some of the linkages happen from outside world as well. So I think that is one suggestion I would give, is make sure that you read, make sure you keep your eyes open, ears open, and see what's happening, understand what's going on and things like that. That's one. The second, I think there are a lot of material out there, but please look at material which is coming from, please look at who's providing the material, not just because it's material. Again, with no disrespect, or with all disrespect, whatever you want to say, basing my study, basing my knowledge and everything on our application or even usage on a set of YouTube influencers who really do not have much of an exposure and expertise, could be, you might get away, you might be successful, but could be hugely damaging, not just to you, not just to the individual, but to the larger ecosystem as well. So I would recommend that people, there are a lot of established people who kind of give talks, and there are a lot of talks, a lot of material that's available. So I think the whole story should be based on who the person are they following, who is the person that they're tracking. And also remember one thing, that nobody will give out proprietary secrets. Even if it's the best of the trader, there is no incentive for me to give out my best of my secrets, right? As long as I'm a trader. Because if I tell you what I'm doing, then I'll become redundant. So, when I tell you something, you also have to understand and look at it from a larger ecosystem thing. But okay, in this model, this is some of the inputs. So this, and they should look at by saying, these are the approaches and ways in which one should be thinking and talking about. Not that this is not a simple prescription. This is more of a process in which you get in, and then you start also creating your own ideas, making your own, it's like you can't learn swimming without getting into the pool and probably drinking water in the pool. If you think I can learn swimming sitting on the shore and just being told, not happen. So similarly, you will lose a little bit of money, but you also burn your fingers a little to kind of and move up that ladder. And that's what I'll kind of advise anybody who wants to kind of be there.
So today, the entire globe is talking about ESG analytics. Now, there are a lot of, how a student can, prepare themselves to get into ESG finance analytics, sustainable finance.
There is nothing called sustainable finance from some perspective. Everything is finance. So again, all these questions are coming back, and I will keep on repeating. Please understand core. Then you kind of look at, okay, what does sustainability in this context mean? What does climate financing, green financing mean? And how do I apply that? So some of the sustainable finance part of it and thing is, you're not supposed to invest in defense. You're not supposed to invest in climate, ecologically harmful products, climate, global warming, and all of that. So you kind of look at around that and play around that in that process. It is not as if sustainable finance is something so different from our regular finance, because after all, today, if I take that argument, today this whole group is being run by people who've been doing general finance all their life. They have not been told anything. So sustainable finance is not something which is completely coming out of from Mars that we need to kind of superimpose. So it is easy. So unless you know finance, you'll not be able to do sustainable finance. It's just, again, Do you want butter on your toast, or do you want margarine, or do you want cheese, or do you want marmalade? How does it matter? I mean, it matters in terms of your choice, but you still need to know where to get the bread and how to toast the bread.
Sir, and I would say when there are a lot of changes in the climate and the entire ecosystem, but still in India we don't have many derivative markets like weather derivatives. We don't have.
Part
We
of it
don't
is
have coffee.
regulation. Part of it is regulation. That has got nothing to do with AI, ML, and part of it is regulation. Part of it is some challenges. Part of it is the market itself is not very developed and deep. So I think it's a combination of this. There have been talks. There have been small increments every year. We've moved a little bit. Could we have moved faster? Answer is obviously yes. Should we have moved faster? Probably yes. But are we moving? We are moving in the direction, and therefore, kind of that holds per se.
And what is the development of CDS market in India? I mean, very few companies. I mean, few
Because there
products
are
are there.
certain, I mean, that's because there are certain regulatory challenges that are there. Very few companies, because you can enter into a CDS on a limited number of assets only, or names only. But the bigger problem is that in a secondary market trade, the asset and the CDS. So somebody who trades on the asset does not have to buy out the CDS, and but you cannot hold a naked CDS, so you have to cancel the CDS, offset the CDS. But offsetting can only happen with the originator. An offset has to happen within 5 days. But the moment you go to the originator to offset, the originator now knows that you don't have the underlying asset, and therefore you are in a corner where you have to liquidate in any case. So the cost of liquidation goes against you. So any benefit that you may have got is more than offset through the cost of liquidation that happens. Hence, you don't find it valuable, and therefore you don't do it. So there are certain regulatory challenges and all of that, which are being talked about, have been talked about, and I think in due course will kind of iron out, which will lead. But I think also, given the fact that the part of that has got slowed down, because even today, probably correctly, there's a huge belief that a significant part of the global financial crisis, which is now about 15 years back, was because of the CDS market in the US, and stability is still not coming. In India, it's even problematic because we don't have social. I mean, it's a completely different economics argument, but it's a reality that in India, banks are your prime engines of social security, because the government is not really a social security provider. Savings, bank deposits are your prime engines of social security. And if banks then get adversely affected through a CDS or CDS market, then the overall social security in the country could be severely compromised, leading to a social unrest and all that. No government, no regulator will be able to afford that and will be able to allow that. And that's why I think people have gone slow in that context.
So with that, we come to the
Okay.
end, sir. So thank you for being with us, sir. It's a wonderful discussion with you. It's a fruitful discussion.
Okay.
For your
Thank you very
insightful
much.
interview, creating a bridge between the quantitative finance and machine learning. The session is undoubtedly enriched the audience with a wealth of concepts of knowledge in this complex yet fascinating domains. Such efforts truly pave way to a deeper understanding of the application of these crucial fields. So thank you for you sharing your expertise knowledge with us, and it's wonderful to be the part of this session. So thank you, sir. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much.